What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college basketball. It is Thursday, March the 13th. We are deep into conference tournaments and we have a ton of games to get to. Going to try to hit a few more today and maybe do it a little bit faster. Before we get started, anyone that's liked these videos, subscribe to the channel, left a comment, thank you. It's meant a ton and it does help a very small channel like this grow. So I appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you very much. But it's the best time of year. Conference tournaments are fully underway. Shout out all of you that are skipping work, calling in sick, creating excuses to get your eyes in front of these games. Shout out my buddies Steve and Gavin in Vegas. I hope you guys are tearing it up. I can't wait to see where the beers lead you today and the rest of the week. Let's dive right in. You'll notice one thing. You might ask, why is Davidson at the top of the show? It's just because their game finished earlier, so I had a chance to write them up before some of the later games. So you might be wondering why Arizona and Kansas is buried at the end of the show. We didn't get that outcome till really late last night, so I didn't get a chance to move it up in the show because of that. Indiana takes on Oregon. This is a matchup we actually knew about ahead of time. They both had byes. Because of the weird structure of the current Big Ten, it's a 2-point spread in favor of Oregon, a 143 total. Pretty clean on the injuries here. This is a rematch from March 4th. Oregon won 73-64 on their home floor. It was a game where Nate Biddle absolutely cooked inside. He had 4 blocks. He was a big part of why this Indiana interior played a little under perhaps expectation. Oregon out-rebounded Indiana 46-43. They also shot 21 free throws to Indiana's 7. And that's just kind of been the story of this Indiana team. They play through their front court, but they're kind of lackluster when they do so. And Oregon plays similarly to this Indiana team, but they kind of just do it better across the board. Resume-wise, Indiana's 2-7 against the top 25. Beat Michigan State, beat Purdue, 2 great wins. One of them was on the road against Sparty as well. But 2 losses outside the top 50. You can't be dropping games to Nebraska and Iowa in this conference. Ask Ohio State yesterday. Oregon 4-5 against the top 25. This team does have the high-end wins that Indiana lacks. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Alabama. Also beat Maryland and Wisconsin within conference. And 3 of those were away from home. 2 of them on a neutral in Vegas, but still outside your home building. They have 2 losses outside the top 50 as well, so it hasn't always been clean. Drop games to Minnesota and Nebraska. Minnesota was on the road. Oregon obviously has some brutal travel that Indiana does not, at least more of it. But stylistically, here's why these teams profile so similarly. 22 and 21 in effective height. Indiana does outrank Oregon in rebounding. It's 84-121, but we saw Oregon crush them on the glass in the first game, so it didn't actually play out like that. And then when you just look at how these teams score, both pretty solid inside. Only one of these teams can shoot from the perimeter. That's Oregon. And their numbers aren't fantastic. But still, Indiana's 249th in three-point percentage. Only Luke Goody's above 40%. When you put him on the floor, he's a sieve on defense. And you run into different matchup constructions that are a problem for you. It's not like you have complete players across the board on your team. You play largely through Omar Ballo, Malik Renault. Those players are limited, and they have an overlapping skill set. Oregon does have Nate Biddle, who's similar, but again, he's unique in the context of their lineup. And then Keyshawn Bartholomew shooting 40% from 3. Shellstad's not far behind. Brandon Angel and TJ Bomber are both players that are due for positive regression based on their career 3-point shooting percentages. And then you look defensively for both these teams. Neither one has really lived up to their potential inside. Both teams are top 45, but interior defense has been an issue for both of the teams. Indiana's at 148, Oregon's at 165. The data point I keep coming back to is we have evidence from the previous matchup who won with the matchups, and it was Oregon. Nate Biddle had the awesome game against the Indiana front court. Indiana can't shoot regardless. And then on the periphery, foul margin and turnover margin both favor Oregon. They're not the biggest gaps, but it is a situation where this is just a more talented team. And across the board, it's kind of like, okay, we have the more talented team in Oregon. They have the better body of work, and they've proven it more times than Indiana this year. Why are we not playing the 2? The reason I put this as a lean is Indiana just took money right away. This opened at 3, went to 2.5, has now gone to 2. Medium resistance here. I'm not sure if it goes any further. But I plan on taking Oregon at some point today. It's just a matter of, does this settle at 2, or do we continue to let this steam down through maybe a 1.5? We shall see. That will be available in Discord. If you are interested, no long-term commitments. There's $10 a week, $30 for a month. We predict sides and totals for all of the games. We do player props for all of the major games and really just whatever the books offer us. Recently, we've been getting more mid-majors. I'm sure we'll get them for the actual NCAA tournament. And created a March Madness tool, did a little demo video on that yesterday, projecting all of the games throughout the tournament to hopefully give you some better context than what's publicly available on how teams are expected to play and what the future matchups might hold. Let's move on. Marquette takes on Xavier. Again, this is a matchup that was already predetermined. We didn't have anything at stake yesterday, so I was able to write this up early. That's why it's at the top of the show. This is the the Big East still plays home and home, so we have the luxury of evaluating 2 matchups between these teams. No major injuries. Marquette is a 2-point favorite. Totals 144.5. And these teams split in the regular season. Marquette won the first game. No Zach Freemantle for Xavier, though. And then they lost the second game, 59-47, an atrocious game overall. In the first game, without Freemantle, the biggest concern I have is Xavier still out-rebounded Marquette. Very close statistically otherwise. Xavier, interestingly, has been a team that's actually been able to hang with the Marquette turnover game. Marquette is one of the biggest turnover margins, the best turnover margins in the country. Xavier did a pretty good job of that, and a lot of teams haven't in this conference, so that's worth noting. In the second game, Xavier won despite only shooting 12% from 3. Both teams shot really poorly in that game, and rebounds were close. It was also a pretty nasty turnover game on both sides. So both games got a little ugly. The Freemantle situation in the first game, Marquette winning by 2. You could probably poke a hole in that, but these are 2 very close teams, as the spread indicates. They play a little differently, but let's get to resumes. Marquette's 3-3 against the top 25, wins over Maryland, Purdue, Wisconsin, all in December or earlier. 2 losses outside the top 50, Dayton and Nova. They were swept by St. John's and UConn in conference, split against Xavier, Creighton, and Nova, so it's a pretty concerning body of work. But, I mean, it's not that much better for Xavier. This team is 0-2 in the top 25, 3-6 in the top 50. Best win is over Marquette. 4 losses outside the top 50, 2 of them outside the top 80 to TCU and Georgetown. I don't know. 2 of those losses did come without Freemantle, but those weren't either of the egregious ones. They were actually some of the better losses they took. So that's hard to parse as well. One of them, Marquette, obviously. Stylistically, pace is pretty good in this game. Both teams are actually faster if you isolate for conference play. Marquette, 169th, they're up to 160th, so just a mini jump. Xavier up to 56 from 83 on the season. So pace is definitely a point in this game that I want to mention because we'll be looking at a total towards the over. Should be a good pace, and neither team has slowed. They've actually sped up since conference play started. Marquette's rebounding woes continue to plague them. 223 in rebounding despite being 77th in effective fight. That'll happen when your big 6'11 center Ben Gold stands in the corner and shoots threes. That's all he does. Xavier's 114th in effective height, 155th in rebounding. So not great, but definitely has an advantage over Marquette that played out in the previous 2 matchups. And Xavier's a significantly better shooting team. They outrank Marquette 69 to 115 in effective field goal, 50 to 169 inside, 11 to 238 from 3. The biggest advantage coming from 3, that's been a concern all year for Marquette, and it has been exacerbated in conference play. I mean, Cam Jones and David Joplin falling below 32% from 3, while Xavier's starting guards, Davion McKnight, Ryan Conwell, Marcus Foster, all hitting at least 36%, and that's on the low end. Conwell's above 40%. You just have different shooting for both of these teams. Defensively, Marquette does have advantages, so it's not like it's going to come easy for Xavier. They're 47th in three-point defense. That'll be a tough matchup. And then I guess on the other side, Marquette has been better scoring inside. I still have questions with this. Xavier's 156 in interior defense, so that's a path for Marquette scoring inside, but it's just they're not scoring on the interior like a normal team with a 6'11 center. He's standing in the corner, and you're getting these crazy drives with Joplin, and you never know what you're getting when he attacks the rim. He's the king of driving without a plan. Cam Jones, that's a little cleaner, and some of these 2-point plays come in transition because Marquette is awesome at forcing turnovers. one of the highest turnover margins in the country, which projects to be an advantage in this game. I just hesitate because Xavier actually cleaned it up pretty well in the first two matchups, and it wasn't a huge factor. And I mean, Xavier's 100th in turnovers committed. They're basically like slightly above average in both turnover categories. So as far as the sides go, it's definitely questionable for me. If you forced me to pick one, it would be Marquette tentatively, but I would rather just play the total in this game. I hit over 144.5. It went up to 146 and then came right back down. I know the narrative bros will love to talk about the neutral court stuff, but pace is awesome in this game. Both teams have a clear scoring path. We'll play over 144.5. Before we move on, if you or somebody knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. You must be 21 or older to play in most areas. Boise State, San Diego State. This is probably the most important game in this conference outside of whoever makes the championship game and could take down that auto bid. That might have some implications as far as bid stealers, which obviously has implications down the line for all the bubble teams. But this is a 1.5 point spread in favor of Boise State, 135 total. The biggest entry in the game is Defensive Player of the Year in the Mountain West, Magoon Guath. Their 6'11 center. He's been out with a knee injury. Reports on him aren't great. Obviously, if you were going to just hold him out at any length of time, you would be aiming for him to come back in this game. However, we've seen him. He's been on the floor for like warm-ups, like dicking around mainly, but he didn't look good. And all the reports coming out of San Diego State are not positive. So the first thing is I'm not going to be playing this game. I'll be holding my breath for the status of Magoon Guath because every single matchup advantage we talk about or disadvantage, like he plays a major role in this game and largely just because he's so good on defense. San Diego State took both regular season matchups, home and on the road. They crushed Boise State on the glass, posted higher shooting percentages. Boise State didn't crack 24% from three in either game. San Diego State cracked 40% in both. So that's definitely an outlier for San Diego State. They're a poor shooting team. But that's just the defensive mismatches they're creating. It's not just, okay, Boise had negative regression shooting from three in those games. San Diego State's an elite defense that definitely has something to do with that. Boise's 3-5 against the top 50. They do have high-end wins, beat Clemson, St. Mary's, and New Mexico. 2 losses outside the top 100, though, Boston College and Washington State. That's a concern. San Diego State has the same high, so I'm not really concerned here. They're 7-4 against the top 50. Wins over UC San Diego, Creighton, and Houston. They have 4 losses outside the top 50. Worst one, UNLV. They got swept by UNLV this year. Anyway, Boise's 8th in rebounding, but 180th in effective height. San Diego State, 17th in effective height, 186th in rebounding. This is a pretty clean matchup, clear on both sides. Magoon Guath is huge. He's their center. If he's out, I would give the advantage to Boise, so we'll see what happens in this contest as far as his status. Boise is a good shooting team. They're strong at scoring inside, but rim protection for San Diego State with Magoon Guath is elite. They're 7th in the country. So what Boise State does well, their only real path to scoring efficiently is completely neutralized if Magoon Guath plays. On the other side, San Diego State has trouble scoring, but Boise State's defense is so bad that they allowed basically some season highs in scoring for San Diego State. Efficiency-wise in the 2 previous games, San Diego State does force more turnovers by a very wide margin. Fouls are a problem for San Diego State at times. They are aggressive. That's how you have such a good defense. But opposing teams can shoot free throws. So that's at least worth mentioning. Boise State, a good free throw shooting team, 26th in the country. Free throw percentage. The whole handicap comes down to Magoon Guath. If he plays, I'm taking San Diego State. If he's out, I'm staying away. And that's basically the end of the story with this game. Davidson St. Louis will be quick on the A-10 game. It's not the best game on the slate. Davidson had to play yesterday. First of all, it's a 4-point spread now in favor of St. Louis. Took a ton of money. It was at St. Louis -2 to open. Total's 141. Davidson had to play in the first round. They beat Richmond by 4 points. St. Louis had a bye as the 5 seed. Rematch from February 25th. St. Louis won 57-56. It was a horrible shooting day from Davidson, under 30% from 3. Not great for St. Louis either, but Davidson lost on the glass. It was a predictable L for them. Davidson's 1-7 in the top 100. Their only win is against 94 Providence. They also dropped a game to number 231 LaSalle, so it's a pretty bad body of work. That's how you end up playing in the first round of the A-10. St. Louis is 2-8 against the top 100, beat St. Joe's and somehow VCU, but they don't have a loss worse than Illinois State at 142, so it is a better body of work. I mean, the St. Louis roster is basically the Indiana State team from last year outside of Conwell. Very disappointing year for them considering the expectations. But there's a lot of advantages for St. Louis. They're better at rebounding, interestingly, by being the smaller team. That did play out in the first game. St. Louis had the advantage in the glass, but this team is just so much better shooting the ball. 20th in effective field goal, 4th on the interior. That's the Robbie Avila effect. 96 from 3. They're ahead of Davidson in every metric shooting. And I guess they come in behind Davidson on total offensive efficiency, which you're seeing on the screen, and asking how can they be better in total efficiency but worse in shooting? It's largely just because turnovers. The turnover margin in this game is not significant, but Davidson has good offensive numbers because they don't turn the ball over. Whereas St. Louis, this doesn't really project to be a strong matchup advantage either way. Turnover margins, St. Louis does have a problem there. They're 283, which dings their overall offensive efficiency. But Davidson's 312th in turnovers forced. So I would rather just take the better shooting team in St. Louis because the turnovers are not projected to be a problem in this game. So I think even St. Louis has the better offense straight up than Davidson. And defense, it's not even a question. Defense, Davidson, 215th in interior, 219 or 242nd defending the 3. St. Louis is actually decent in both metrics. I was shocked. This came in as a 2-point spread to open because stylistically, this is an absolutely horrendous matchup for Davidson. And Davidson just doesn't have an answer for stopping Avila, the third most efficient player in the A-10 this year. I played the St. Louis -2. Our model makes this about 2.5. I think stylistically, you could push this to 3 if you wanted to test it. I think I'm out on -4, though. I'm certainly not playing Davidson, but it's St. Louis or pass. If you can find a 2, numbers are all over the board with this game. I think you play it with St. Louis. In the American, USF takes on Wichita State, 3.5-point spread in favor of Wichita, 144 total. USF's only injury is Deontay Green. Wichita is healthier after they had Ronnie DeGray missed 12 games. Justin Hill missed 5. A slew of other starters missed a game here or there. And my full handicap in this game comes down to numbers. Efficiency metrics have not quite caught up with Wichita State. Even if you just isolate for the last month, this team is better than their overall numbers you're putting on the floor. So we make this game minus about a 3.5. I would play this outside that number. I played the 3.5 myself. And a lot of this comes down to, first of all, resumes. USF is 5-16 against the top 200. Their best win is against Wichita. That was an injury game for Wichita. And they have 2 losses outside the top 200. Wichita is 3-10 against the top 200. Wins over Memphis, Kansas State. They do have a couple losses outside the top 200 themselves, but this team has been super injured this year. And yeah, they split the regular season series. I guess you could point to that in favor of USF. But again, Ronnie DeGray didn't play. Wichita State still won on the glass, and USF posted just some wild efficiency numbers shooting the ball. Outlier shooting percentages. Wichita State did get them back in the second game, and they still didn't even have Justin Hill in that game. I will say Kobe Knox didn't play for USF, so it was a little more neutral on the injury front. But both teams shot poorly in that game. USF definitely experienced regression, but Wichita crushed them on the glass again. This time it was 42-22, 19 offensive boards. And that's something we can point to in this game. I don't think either team is really going to be strong scoring. USF is 224th in effective field goal percentage. Wichita is 286th. The reason USF won in the first game is, one, Wichita didn't have their best defender, DeGray. He is their best defender. And they shot a crazy outlier performance. If both these teams just shoot to expectation, it's going to be greasy like it was in the second game. But then you have a significant rebounding advantage for Wichita, who's 60th, and USF is 304th. USF got annihilated on the glass in the first game. And I keep coming back to the injuries. I think there is some chances that Wichita is better than 286 in effective field goal. Maybe the rebounding numbers are even better. And certainly their defense with the Grays improved. So we'll play the 3.5 here on the injury front. DeGray has been big for this team, mainly on the defensive end. All right, let's get to the games that actually had some results yesterday that are meaningful today. Big slate for these major conferences. Iowa State, BYU. This game is a 3-point spread in favor of Iowa State, a 147.5 total. And I took BYU +2. I got ahead of myself. Here's what happened. Watching Iowa State playing in the early window yesterday, they're beating the piss out of Cincinnati in the Big 12 tournament while BYU is cooling on a bye. Keyshawn Gilbert doesn't play in the second half. Tamin Lipsey goes down with an injury late in the game. So I'm eyeing up these openers. All right, we're going to play BYU. We're not going to see Tamin Lipsey or Gilbert tomorrow. +2 comes out. Obviously, somewhat adjusted for the injuries. Hit it. After the game, I hit this before the press conference, Otzelberger comes out and says Tamin Lipsey is going to play today, which I guess shouldn't have been that surprising. Tamin Lipsey's been hurt the entire season, and he never misses a game. The guy's an absolute warrior. A little more tepid on Keyshawn Gilbert's status. I don't know. So that's how we got to the play. I'm not loving it. It definitely is not the first one on my card, but here's sort of the stylistics. BYU did win the first game between these two. It was an overtime game, 88-85. They outshot Iowa State inside and out, but the Cyclones murdered BYU on the glass, 52-24. And, BYU murdered Iowa State on the glass, 52-24. The reason BYU almost lost is they turned it over 29 times, 29. So I don't know what to make of this. Both of these advantages should be noteworthy in this game. Both teams shot 31 free throws. Resume-wise, Iowa State's 3-5 against the top 25, beat Texas Tech, Kansas, and Arizona. They should be 4-4. They had the Caleb Love loss, basically where he hit a half-court shot, and then they dropped the game in OT, but still. 3 losses outside the top 50, West Virginia, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. They had a starter out in every one of those games, and that's been the story with Iowa State this year. They have seldom played with everyone healthy, and they're probably not going to in this game. BYU is 3-3 against the top 25, wins over Kansas, Arizona, Iowa State, mostly coming of late. They have 4 losses outside the top 50, Providence, TCU, Utah, and Cincinnati, so that's not great. But they've righted the ship recently. If you like looking at recent play, they're riding an 8-game win streak, 3 of those games, top 25 opponents. BYU is better than Iowa State in efficiency metrics on the glass. It's 17-37, and they slaughtered Iowa State in the glass in game 1. BYU is the better shooting team by a pretty decent margin. They're 5th in effective field goal, 36 and 3-point percentage. Iowa State's 59th in effective field goal, pretty good across the board, and there might be room for improvement with their best 3-point shooter, Momcilovic, missing an entire month. And Iowa State is 5th in overall defense. They do lag behind in 3-point percentage, defending the 3. They're 99th there, but they force a ton of turnovers, evidenced by the 29 that BYU committed in the first game. And as far as BYU's defense, 96 in the interior, 2 of 7 and 3. There's going to be opportunities for Iowa State to score. Turnover margin, if you want to just look at it statistically, BYU 2/10 in turnovers committed. That's horrible. Iowa State 9th in turnovers generated. But what do we get out of Tamin Lipsey and Keyshawn Gilbert? These are 2 of the 3 most efficient players on the court, 2 of the better defenders. If either one of them are limited or out, I'm not as worried about the turnovers. The glass, they're not super involved there, and there wasn't a huge – like BYU crushed them with these guys in the first game. So it's like, what are we doing here? The whole handicap comes down to how healthy you think they are. If either one is out, BYU smash. Both are injured or limited, even better. We make this basically at -2 with everyone healthy in the game. Now, there is some nuance to this because Iowa State at full strength should be favored by more than 2 points. We just haven't got a glimpse of them really playing at full strength most of the year. But I think there are a lot of outs to BYU covering this spread and taking money throughout the day, depending on what happens with the Iowa State status. I will say this would be a stay away at full strength. We'll see where it comes in. SEC play, we have Arkansas taking on Ole Miss, 3.5-point spread in favor of Ole Miss. 145 total. Arkansas is the injuries, Boogie Flan and Edu Thiero. Both have been out for a little bit now. 2 of the 3 most efficient players on that team. Definitely a concern. Arkansas tried to lose yesterday. I'm sure you've heard about it. If you're watching the show, you're in the weeds with college basketball. But if you didn't see, Arkansas is up 3 shooting free throws. And Coach Cal instructs Nelly Davis to miss a free throw that would put them up 4 and ensure a win. He tries to miss it, accidentally banks it in, thus securing the win despite Coach Cal's moronic recommendations. Would have been just great theater to see them lose the game in that way. But unfortunately for anyone who hates Coach Cal, they've pretty much locked up their place in the tournament as long as we don't get like 8 bid stealers or something. And now they have to play Ole Miss after barely getting by South Carolina, a game they blew a massive lead while Ole Miss was chilling. Anyway, Ole Miss took the first game between these teams, 73-66. That was on the road to Arkansas. Shot 22% from three. Ole Miss hit 39%. Rebounding was actually close in this game, which it shouldn't be. Coach Cal, Ole Miss is this tiny, tiny team. And Arkansas has been beat on the glass a lot recently. This is a coaching and effort statistic mainly. Resume-wise, Arkansas is 2-7 in the top 25, beat Kentucky and Missouri, 2 losses outside the top 40, LSU and South Carolina. So they're only bad losses, if you were to call them, that are in conference. It's a pretty good body of work for Arkansas. They're the victim of the conference they play in. Ole Miss is 5-6 against the top 25, beat BYU, Louisville, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee. It's funny. Every time I see BYU and Louisville pop up on these non-con SEC schedules, it's just L, 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 and people don't want to put in Georgia, Vandy, and these SEC teams. Your preference, not mine. But Ole Miss does have a couple of the losses as well that you might poke a hole in. Memphis and Vanderbilt, both are inside the top 50 still, so a great body of work for Ole Miss. I mean, this should be a clash of styles on paper if Arkansas could ever efficiently play through Brazil or Ivasic, but they just haven't been able to, and they're not even getting full minutes with the injuries. Brazil has a real problem fouling. Arkansas is the taller team by a massive margin. They're 7th in effective height. Ole Miss is 272. Somehow, being the 7th tallest team in the country, they're Arkansas, that is, only 192nd in rebounding. This really wasn't an advantage in the first game. It barely played out. I mean, to me, this is just poor coaching and an effort thing. I don't have the answer. They should have an advantage here. They just don't. Shooting-wise, Arkansas actually has a better effective field goal percentage. The reason Ole Miss comes ahead in total efficiency and offense, Ole Miss never turns the ball over. The second in the country in turnovers committed, never turning the ball over. And they forced a ton of turnovers. This is actually a big mismatch in their favor in this game against some sometimes inefficient Arkansas guards. Arkansas is decent at shooting. Most of that comes inside. Again, that should be an advantage in this game. It really puzzling that they couldn't exploit it in the first matchup. Ole Miss is 187th in interior defense. Arkansas doesn't shoot a lot of threes, so that is a path for them and a reason why I would hesitate. But from there, Ole Miss should experience some three-point regression at some point as long as they get Dre Davis and Matt Morrell to hopefully stop taking as many, because Murray and Perdula are actually hitting a lot of their threes. It's just Davis and Matthew Morrell are taking too many. Defensively, Arkansas does have some advantages in this game. Really, it's just the turnovers that favor Ole Miss. So inside and out, if you're in the half court, Arkansas does show up. But you could poke holes like Thero being out hurts that for sure. He was one of their better players, especially in the defensive end. This is a very hard game to handicap, as most Arkansas games are. You have them beating teams they shouldn't, losing to teams they shouldn't, and you get weird outcomes. Ole Miss does have a clear weakness. Their size is just going to limit them. So it's not a game I plan on taking. If you force me to, it would be Ole Miss. I'll fade the Cal coaching really at any chance I can at this point. But in a game where Ole Miss does have a clear weakness, we'll just wait for a matchup in future games. Sticking in the SEC, Texas versus Texas A&M, 5.5 point spread in favor of A&M, 139 total. Texas helped their bubble chances a little bit, but still probably too far for them. They would need to win at least one more game. This would do a lot. They beat Vandy yesterday, which sort of helped, 79-72. Texas A&M was chilling. These teams split in the regular season. A&M won the first matchup 80-60. Texas won the second one 70-69. Predictably, in the one Texas won, they put on a shooting clinic. A&M can't shoot. They were horrible shooting in both games. They did crush the glass, which is what they do. But when a team outshoots you, as widely as Texas did, you'll just lose. Texas 2-5 against the top 25, beat Missouri and A&M. They don't have a loss worse than South Carolina. That's actually their only loss outside the top 50. They just have lost 7 of their last 10 games. A&M, pretty clean body of work. They're 4-4 against the top 25, beat Texas Tech, Purdue, Missouri, and Auburn. Auburn was in a weird narrative-y spot after they clinched the conference. Predictable letdown, if you will. They have 3 losses outside the top 30. UCF, Texas, and Vanderbilt, only 1 loss outside the top 50 there. But with Texas A&M, it's can they rebound their way to a victory because this team can't shoot. Again, Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps, they're going to huck up as many bricks as they possibly can in this game and hope the offensive glass takes care of itself. When it does, this team looks awesome. When it doesn't, this team is horrible. Rebounding-wise, A&M certainly has the advantage at 6-143. Kendall Weaver did return for Texas, and the guy has some of the craziest vertical jumps I've ever seen. So he should help on the glass. I don't think it's enough. A&M's the number 1 rebounding team in the country. But I do think Texas can hit enough shots to keep this game competitive with Trey Johnson hitting his stride. Texas is at full strength now. Kaluma's been a huge letdown for them, but you have multiple weapons on paper, and you have an awesome defender in Shedrick if he doesn't foul. But I just don't know if this Texas team has enough. Rodney Terry's an awful coach. He's going to get fired. If not this year, then next. Texas A&M still has superior offensive numbers, even though they're 315th in effective field goal percentage. I mean, like, what are we doing here, Texas? What are we doing here? Defensively, A&M definitely has the advantage. They're stronger inside and out. It's not even particularly close. If you did want to poke a hole, it would be their three-point defense, 136th. But Texas doesn't take a lot of threes. They're 261st in three-point rate. Turnovers, it doesn't project to be a huge mismatch. Texas doesn't turn it over a lot. A&M forces a ton, but they will turn it over themselves. Fortunately for them, Texas doesn't force any turnovers. So this is just a very volatile matchup. Anytime A&M takes the floor, it's going to be that. And basically, to break this down for you, if we have an A&M team and they're a bet, you better believe there's like 2 or 3 point difference between the model and the projected spread. I want that extra cushion with A&M, and maybe that's the wrong way to look at it because you don't like lose extra money if A&M doesn't, like, let's say it's a pick'em game. If A&M loses by 20 points, you don't lose extra money. If they win by 20 points, you don't win extra money. This probably all comes out in the wash, and this is maybe just a bias I'm trying to work through. But it's not what I'm going to play. We actually make this pretty close to the -5, -5.5. I would actually lean Texas mathematically, but this team is awful, and I'm probably biased against them. And their coach, stylistically and what we've seen from both these teams this year, I would rather play Texas A&M -5.5 if you force me. If this got to, I would need it to be like a 4.5 or 4 to play the A&M side. I don't think you could make me play Texas at any number. Kansas takes on Arizona, a rematch from the season finale between these teams. It's a 1.5 point spread in favor of Arizona, 152 total. Kansas did win that first game. It was their senior night. They played in fog, 83-76. Both teams shot the ball well. Basically, Arizona just had a few more turnovers. They allowed a few more offensive boards, and you got the gap we had. Kansas just played an OT yesterday. They barely got by UCF 98-99 while Arizona was chilling. So right away, extra rest is going to favor the Wildcats. Kansas is 4-6 against the top 25. They have some crazy wins. They were all early in the season, Michigan State and Duke. But then they beat Iowa State and Arizona in conference. 3 losses outside the top 50, West Virginia, Kansas State, and Utah. The bad part about that is they were all recent. So Kansas is a team trending in the wrong direction. Arizona's 3-8 against the top 25. I think you could argue they should be 2-9 because they had the OT win off the Caleb Love half quarter against Iowa State. From there, they knocked off BYU and Texas Tech. A couple of losses outside the top 50 for them too, West Virginia and Kansas. And right away in this game, I think there's an under you could play at 130 or 153.5. Expecting pace to slow, especially Kansas, off the overtime game. Arizona plays fast. They love to play in transition, so you're definitely going to have an answer for that. But Kansas' pace should be slowed down a little bit in this game. And then I have offensive questions for both teams. I guess, first of all, Arizona's played better on defense since they've inserted Visar and Carter Bryant into extra minutes, especially their rim protection. It's significantly better. That's where Kansas generally scores. Their best player is Hunter Dickinson. He's not a floor spacer. He can't shoot threes. He doesn't even attempt them. And then KJ Adams is not an offensive player in the slightest. So that matches up well for Arizona's defense. You have the answers on paper to what Kansas does well. Could Kansas shoot an outlier 3 percentage? They don't take a lot of threes. Rightfully so. They're horrible at shooting them. Basically just Zeke Mayo hits threes. DeJuan Harris is a pure facilitator, and you get nothing out of your 5th starter or whoever they insert into that spot. So I think the matchup is bad for Kansas offensively. Can Arizona score? Kansas is 8th in total defensive efficiency. For everything KJ Adams lacks on offense, he is a good defender. Kansas has excellent size. They're 13th in effective height. Good rebounding team. Both of these teams are. So I think you have the answers inside. Not that Arizona is particularly strong scoring there. Visar, Bryant, their better skills come on the defensive end. And from there, Arizona does have good 3-point shooters. Del Orso, some of these players actually hit about 40%. It's just you have Caleb Love taking so many of them, and he's awful at shooting threes. Or speaking to the comments from a few days ago, he might actually be a decent shooter, but he takes a lot of bad threes. Whatever the situation is, the outcome is the same. He has about a 32% three-point percentage, and this team is awful at shooting threes as a whole. Kansas is still 13th defending the perimeter. This is a bad matchup for them. I'm playing an under in this game. I would rather play Arizona than play the Kansas side. I think they have more answers as long as you can reel in Caleb Love. That's always a danger. But under in this game makes a lot of sense to me. Both defenses playing well. I know the game they just played and Fog went over, but coming off an OT game, I think Kansas slows this down a little more than we might expect, and both teams strong defensively for what the other team offers on offense. Both offenses have a clear weakness. Mississippi State takes on Missouri in the SEC. Mississippi State demolished LSU last night in the opening round of the SEC tournament. Missouri was chilling. They had a bye. 3.5 point spread in favor of Missouri, 157 total. Missouri won the first game on February 1st, 88-61 on Mississippi State's floor. Mississippi State had a really bad shooting percentage, especially inside, 41.5%. They were also out-rebounded 39-31. And I think that's the big key to the game. Can you improve that interior shooting percent? Because Missouri's interior defense is actually decent on the year, but it's front-loaded. This team is about 152nd in interior defense on the year. This has dropped outside the top 200 since January, and it has gotten to horrifyingly bad levels in the last 6 games or so. I don't want to specifically talk about that because it's a tiny sample, and we also have tiny samples previously where they played well on the interior. So I don't know what to make of that. It's hard to reconcile. Do they see a bounce back against Mississippi State? I'm not sure, but stylistically, Missouri's tall. They shouldn't be this bad in effective height. Because their effective height is 30th overall, they shouldn't be this bad inside. They can rebound. The rebounding is pretty neutral between these teams, 74 to 127. It's just, do we get the 152nd ranked interior offense or do we get 302nd? I don't know the answer, but it's important because Mississippi State can't shoot. And they take a lot of threes. 303 in three-point percentage, 105 in three-point rate. I mean, it's basically just the midget Hubbard chucking up threes poorly. I'm not a big Mississippi State guy. They basically play through a center in Cam Matthews or a forward in Cam Matthews that does nothing peripherally. He's an excellent defender, basically an eraser inside, but then he cannot score offensively. And Hubbard is a tiny, tiny point guard. So you get Mississippi State's resume, 1-7 against the top 25. Their best win is against A&M, and we talked about A&M. If A&M doesn't shoot the ball well, there's only so much you can do on the offensive glass. If you hit 12% of your threes, you still can't win. So that's Mississippi State's best win. The rest of the resume is bolstered by wins over Memphis, Vanderbilt, and Ole Miss. They've been dropping games to everyone who's above that. Missouri's 3-5. They actually do have high on wins. They beat Florida and Bama, also knocked off Kansas. Their worst win is Memphis as well. So their low end is about the same. And Missouri can shoot the ball significantly better than Mississippi State. They're 28th in three-point percentage. Grill is a flamethrower, 21st inside. Mississippi State's still 62nd in total defense, so it's not fantastic. They're definitely better than Missouri, but I mean, the paths to scoring are definitely there for Missouri. I'm not sure they're there for Mississippi State because of their offensive limitations. And you're really banking on just recent play from Missouri not improving if you're a Mississippi State backer, and I am not. We make this outside the 3.5. It's actually one of the better lines on the day. I'm playing this happily through 4.5 on the Missouri side. No issues with any of those numbers, especially off Mississippi State having to play yesterday and Missouri with the extra rest. We'll play this towards the Tigers. Baylor, Texas Tech, Big 12 game, 6.5 point spread, 141 total. No major injuries really in the game. OG Wanu, Josh, whatever your last name is, he's been out for Baylor for a while. He's their center. So you get Baylor playing Norchad Omier at the 5. He still is an awesome rebounder. So honestly, that might not have made as much of a difference as some people have been saying. But anyway, Baylor just dismantled Kansas State yesterday. So maybe the having played doesn't matter quite as much. Texas Tech was chilling. Texas Tech did win the first game, 73-59. Baylor didn't have edge come in that game. So that kind of explains their atrocious shooting performance. Texas Tech wasn't a whole lot better. They were at 41% from the interior. And rebounding was actually dead even in that game. Again, Norchad does a ton. It's not like Texas Tech's super tall either. They're playing top and at the 5 a lot. But resume-wise, Baylor 2-9 against the top 25, beat St. John's and Kansas, lost to some egregious teams, TCU and Colorado. Texas Tech's 4-4 in the top 25, wins over BYU, Arizona, Houston, and Kansas. 3 losses outside the top 70. And these are some bad losses too. Excuse me, they have 3 losses outside the top 20. All of them were outside the top 70, though. So this is crazy. Out of all of their losses, you either are losing to top 20 teams or St. Joe's, UCF, and TCU. I don't have an explanation for that. Very weird body of work. But stylistically in this game, we already talked about it. Baylor's playing one of the smaller lineups in the conference, made worse by their injuries. Texas Tech's not tall either, though. 2'11" in effective height. Both teams have rebounded effectively. I do expect Texas Tech to hold their advantage 36-95. Wouldn't expect that to improve with Baylor's injuries. And then shooting the ball, it's just Texas Tech has been so much better than Baylor, who's trended significantly down since conference play started. Edgecombe, who had that flamethrower for 1 month in January, has significantly regressed. It's basically just Celestine shooting threes well, and no one else is actually playing up to expectation. And Texas Tech is 48th in three-point defense. They're actually much stronger across the board in total defense. This top 25 unit, good at forcing turnovers too. That could be a problem for Baylor. And then on the other side, it's just Texas Tech is over 100 spots ahead of Baylor in effective shooting percentage. They're 19th in three-point percentage. Baylor cannot defend the 3. They're 291st there. Inside, they're 145th too, so Toppin should absolutely feast. I mean, this is just a horrific stylistic matchup for Baylor, who kind of needs this win to ensure they get into the tournament. They're bubbling hard. I think, honestly, they should be ahead of stupid teams like West Virginia, but maybe we'll talk about them in a... Basically, on that tangent quickly, West Virginia is not a tournament team. Can we, remove them? So much of their body of work came in the non-con with DeVries. He's been out, and they've been horrible without him. We need to properly evaluate that. Anyway, we make this right around the projected spread, actually somewhat within it. This disagrees with just my dumb brain trying to stylistically evaluate what I see on the court. I would play Texas Tech if you force me to. I think Baylor might take some money, so this is one we'll probably wait, but I'm just not really sure how Baylor wins this game against a fully healthy Texas Tech team at this point, with Toppin dominating the inside and having a top 20 three-point shooting unit as a whole. Oklahoma, Kentucky in the SEC. 6-point spread in favor of Kentucky, 163.5 total. A lot of injuries. Sam Goodwin for Oklahoma. Kentucky's Jackson Robinson and Kirk Kriisa. Oklahoma had to play yesterday in probably the toughest first-round game of the day. They beat Georgia, held them off. That was a bit surprising. Kentucky had the bye. Kentucky did win the first matchup between these teams, 83-82. Everyone was healthy, but Lamont Butler, Andrew Carr, and Robinson all were limited. Didn't play full minutes. Kentucky also shot 30% from 3, which is not normal, and Oklahoma hit 40%. On the periphery, most of these stats were pretty comparable: rebounds, turnovers, fouls. Oklahoma's 3-8 against the top 25, and here's where we see this non-con pop up. Beat Arizona, Louisville, beat Missouri. Their only 2 losses outside the top 40 came to Texas and LSU. Kentucky has a wild body of work. I can't believe it's this good considering how hurt they've been. 8-4 against the top 25. Wins over Duke, Gonzaga, Louisville, Florida, Tennessee twice. They do have 5 losses outside the top 30, but none of them are lower than Vandy at 47. This is a crazy body of work for Kentucky. And in this game, I'm just not sure Oklahoma has the answers. Typically, when a team plays Kentucky and I'm looking for a side, I want them to be taller. I want them to be strong inside. Even with Amari Williams playing extra minutes, that's where Kentucky's still weak defensively. They're 268th. They actually are tall, 41st, and they have a significant rebounding advantage here. But I like when teams can play with a Janai Broom or something on the inside. You can have a pure go-to matchup every single play that you can exploit. Oklahoma doesn't have that. Oklahoma is going to beat you by shooting threes. That's a terrible matchup against Kentucky. So first of all, on the glass, Kentucky over 100 ranks ahead of Oklahoma effective field goal percentage. Rebounding, it's even worse, 62-242. Oklahoma doesn't exploit that inside matchup with their size. And then shooting threes, yeah, that's right in the teeth of this Kentucky defense with Lamont Butler back. Oklahoma does have good three-point shooting. They've regressed positively after they had a weird sort of month stretch in conference where they were below average. But yeah, I mean, Kentucky has more answers offensively than Oklahoma in this game. I would rather just play the Kentucky side, if anything, but I don't plan on taking this game overall. It's basically 2 teams that shoot threes, shoot a ton of them, shoot them pretty well. Both defenses defend that awesome. top 21 units in three-point defense. Who's the better pass scoring inside? I think it's Kentucky. So this will be a pass. Kentucky also a little better in turnover margin and foul margin. Oklahoma's run pretty hot of late to put themselves on the bubble. They probably need this win to get in, maybe not, but we'll see where it shakes out. I also think Oklahoma's going to take money. So if you're a Kentucky backer, which I hypothetically could be, would need it to move a little bit. Nova takes on UConn, Villanova, that is. 5.5 spread, 5.5 in favor of UConn, 135 total. These teams split the regular season. The home team won both times. Nova won in a game where UConn didn't have McNeely by 2, forced 7 more turnovers, 7 more fouls. UConn did win on the glass, but it wasn't enough. Second game, UConn won 66-59. That was a full-strength game. Nova shot 34.5% from the inside. UConn shot 21% from 3, just an awful shooting game across the board. Bad peripheral stats. Just a greasy game. That's how you get such a low score. Nova's 4-7 against the top 50. They beat St. John's and Marquette. They have 6 losses outside the top 50. And they lost to 277 Columbia, Virginia. Like, what the hell is this team doing? They're going to fire their coach too. UConn 7-5 against the top 25. Beat Gonzaga, against the top 50. Beat Gonzaga, Marquette twice. Beat Baylor. It's a good body of work for this UConn team. Just not what we expected. They also have losses to Colorado, Dayton, and Seton Hall. So I'm going to rephrase that. It's a decent body of work for UConn. Not good, not bad. It's too many points, in my opinion. Stylistically in this game, these teams are much closer than 5.5. Effective height is pretty neutral. Not much separates them there. Rebounding is 22-69 in favor of UConn. Not much separates them there. Effective field goal is 31-34. Very little separates them there. Defense, it's 90-108. Like, where are the gaps? Where are the gaps in these teams? I guess on the interior, UConn is much better defending than Villanova, 15-126. But Villanova is shooting a ton of threes. They're second in the country in three-point percentage. That exploits UConn's defensive weakness at 261 three-point defense. The reason Nova's offense comes in just a little higher is they never turn the ball over. UConn does. Their point guards are, Diarra is hurt. He's playing through it, so that's at least a hole you could poke, but Mahaney's terrible with the backup point guard. The bottom line here is this is just much, much closer, really across the board. Not really sure how you get 5.5 in favor of UConn. Maybe if you were handicapping based on pure talent, but even that I'm not sure. You've got like Wooga Poplar, Dixon. This Nova team has a lot of talent. They're just poorly coached. Perhaps that's the edge. You have Hurley versus Neptune. But I'm going to take the 5.5 with Villanova and just move on. Whoops. Don't want to skip ahead. We can't skip Clemson and SMU in the ACC. Can't skip an ACC clash. 6-point spread in favor of Clemson, 144 total. SMU just dismantled Syracuse yesterday while Clemson was chilling. Clemson won the regular season 79-69. SMU didn't have Boopy Miller. He's back now, so that's worth mentioning. They also out-rebounded Clemson in the game, which I didn't expect, 39-24. But Clemson did force 16 turnovers, had the better shooting numbers by a wide margin, so that's how they still got a 10-point victory. SMU does not have a top 50 win this year. Their best win is against Pitt at 61. 4 losses outside the top 70 to Butler, Wake, Stanford, and Florida State. Clemson's 2-1 against the top 25 with the Duke and Kentucky wins. They have 4 questionable losses as well to Boise, Memphis, South Carolina, and Georgia Tech. Stylistically, I guess mathematically, you would not have Clemson favored by 6 in this game. But I think a lot of that is bolstered by SMU beating up on really bad teams and hanging close in games they should have won by more. Anyway, size is actually great for both teams. SMU crushed them on the boards in the first game. That should not have happened. Clemson's 26th in effective height, SMU's 6th. It's 18-90. So, yeah, there is an advantage to SMU on the glass, but it shouldn't be that wide. And then shockingly, I don't know. I wanted to bet Clemson. Maybe I'm talking myself out of it a little bit. These teams are 18th and 19th in three-point percentage. Three-point defense, 149-115. All of it's very close. On the interior, 84-116 in two-point percentage in favor of SMU. Three-point defense is actually a little better for SMU, 32-107. Turnover margin does significantly favor Clemson. But just like looking at the efficiency metrics, they're very close between these two teams. If you're a Clemson backer, you're doing it on the back of resume. SMU, despite having these numbers, has still been unable to pick up a key win. They haven't had a lot of opportunities, and they've been playing hurt recently without Boopy. But man, to me, I'm disagreeing with the numbers. It's a Clemson or pass. I love the talent on this Clemson roster with Hunter, Shiflin, Locken. Not sure how SMU is going to match up with that talent-wise. Boopy, I think, is a solid player. Not sure how healthy he is at this point, clearly returning for the conference tournament. But I'm probably going to hesitate on this. I wouldn't be surprised if SMU takes money because mathematically it should not be 6. That's just something you'd have to point to largely through resumes, with Clemson outperforming expectation and SMU being a horrible team compared to expectation. Closing this out, we'll do a couple rapid fires. We have Eastern Michigan taking on Miami, Ohio. 5.5-point spread for Miami, Ohio is the favorite. 149 total. We did play a Miami, Ohio in this game. Injuries were clean overall. Went and dove into those deep. So nothing to really worry about there. But I'm just not sure what Eastern Michigan does better than Miami, Ohio anywhere. Offensive, defensive efficiency. Gap favors Miami, Ohio. Effective field goal, 33-102. You guessed it. Inside, outside. Miami, Ohio, significant advantages. The only place where Eastern Michigan is even slightly ahead of Miami, Ohio is 2-point defense, 232-249, so it's extremely close. 3-point defense is not even close in favor of Miami, Ohio. Rebounding favors Miami, Ohio. That's close because height is close. Turnover margin. Eastern Michigan's 290th in turnovers committed. Miami, Ohio, 57th in turnovers generated. For two teams at full strength, I'm just not really sure how this isn't closer to a 7, which is basically the number we're making this. We make this close to like a -6, -7 in this spot. We'll play the Miami, Ohio side. And to close it out, we'll close this with A-10 matchup between Fordham and George Washington. Fordham had to play yesterday. George Washington was chilling. This is another game where injuries are not a big factor, but I'm just not sure on the gap and efficiency in this spot. Offense is pretty close between these teams, but then you look at effective shooting. It's 295 for Fordham, 209 for George Washington. It's almost 100 spots ahead. On the inside, George Washington's 102nd in interior scoring. Fordham is 256 in interior defense. And that comes because Fordham plays a tiny lineup at 245, and George Washington is massive. They're 89th for this conference. Rebounding is actually relatively close, but I mean, I'm going to side with the team that has the significant size advantages and has the major mismatch inside. And you have on the other side, you just don't have a path for scoring for Fordham. They're 268 in 2-point percentage, 289th in 3-point percentage. Like, what are we doing here? Turnovers forced. Again, Fordham 287th in turnovers committed. George Washington 59th in turnovers forced. Foul margin significantly favors George Washington. We make this outside the 7.5. One will play happily. But thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. We'll be back tomorrow. Going to really grind and get to those good games. So until then, good luck. We'll see you later.